Hello and welcome to the WARC Podcast, coming to you all the way from the south of France. I'm Rica Facundo, managing editor at WARC APAC and the host of today's very first Cannes Lions special episode. We're bringing you the headlines and exclusive insights from across the festival every day this week, so grab yourself a croissant and settle in for some fantastic discussion. Today we're talking about how brands can unshittify their customer experience and boost brand loyalty. The financial impact of Dell Media for brands, featuring a new study of 60 formats across 12 countries. And did you know that 90% of trend reports come from just 10 cities? We'll be discussing how to implement trends into your creative work that actually reflect your key markets and categories. But before we meet our first guest, let's get to the headlines with WARC's senior editor, Anna Hamill. Hi, Anna. So what's making headlines today?
Hi, Rica. Well, Cannes Lions has released the final tally of entries today. So this year, the jury teams will be examining 26,900 campaigns across all categories, which is up slightly on 2024. So entries for categories including design, creative B2B, and entertainment lines for sport saw double-digit growth in entries this year. The Glass Lion expanded its scope as well this year, so it's moving beyond gender discrimination campaigns to broader work tackling social injustices. So we saw that category increase 53% on last year as well. And one interesting number to note is that entries from independent advertising agencies, i.e. as opposed to those owned by the big holding companies, increased 18% in 2025 compared to 2024.
That's a lot, Anna, but what else has been going on?
Apple opened the festival this morning sharing how their philosophy on human-centered design can drive creativity in the age of algorithms. This talk went behind the work that saw Apple become the 2025 recipient of the Cannes Lions Creative Marketer of the Year award again, winning the coveted award for the first time since 2019. One of the most interesting things I think about Apple's products and services is that they really help people to make extraordinarily creative things. And Apple's marketing really leans into that. The Shot on iPhone campaign, for example, which a lot of our listeners will know, is 10 years old this year and still going strong around the world. And Tor Mirren, who is Apple's VP of marketing, he revealed that he's an unflappable optimist when it comes to the potential for AI to revolutionize the advertising industry. He said, quote, "The good news is that AI is not going to kill advertising, ... And the ... is important here because he also says, the bad news is that it's not going to save advertising. And I think that's a real call to action for the industry this year. He also said that there's no algorithm and no AI in the world more capable of making us feel more than the human mind, which I think is something that's really important to think about as we think about all of these amazing, but also slightly scary new tech tools coming into the advertising industry. These stories are brought to you by WARC News, our daily email newsletter. Go to warc.com/feed to read more about these stories and much, much more across the festival all week.
Thanks, Anna. Fundamentally outdated approaches to marketing and customer experience are leading to a loyalty crisis. CX, or customer experience, has devolved into a technical discipline obsessed with optimization metrics instead of focusing on the emotional side of brand experience. The result? The unshittification of digital experiences. Our first guest today is fresh off the Cannes Lions stage, Yael Cesarkas, Executive Strategy Director at RGA, who is here to share how to command loyalty by bridging the divide between brand promise and experience delivery. Yael, welcome to the WARC Podcast.
Thank you. So wonderful to be here again.
We first need to talk about that last year's word of the year, which I love, unshittification. What does it mean to you? Why is it a serious problem? And how did we get there?
Okay, so before we dive into any of that, don't you just love how our industry took a curse word and made it sound really sophisticated and academic, right? Unshittification, and it actually made it to Oxford Dictionary. So let's start with a basic definition. Unshittification, the meaning of the word is the gradual deterioration of the experience around a product or a service as a company becomes more profitable and less consumer friendly, right? So one way to think about it is, that's a proof, the fact that there's a word and it trended to become a word of the year. It's a proof that it's not anecdotal. There's a real phenomenon and it's kind of going under the radar It's underpinning a lot of other effects, a lot of other KPIs, but it's not being talked about a lot. And so that's why it was important this year that we bring this topic on stage.
Do you think we're at peak unshittification or it's just going to get worse?
It depends how you look at it. So again, it's not anecdotal. This year, we've hit the lowest CX quality score in the Forrester Index. And this index cuts across, and the decline in the index score cuts across all categories and most brands and geographies. And so we are at the lowest point after a 3-year acceleration of that decline. I sure hope we only go upwards from here and not further down, but that requires some meaningful changes, both organizational changes and kind of craft changes, both within brand marketing folks and CX teams.
I mean, I'm really glad that it trended last year and will continue to trend because I think, we're all consumers at the end of the day. And that is an experience everyone can relate to. Everyone has a really bad customer experience, especially online, which is my next question for you, because, brand experience, customer experience, that's a part and parcel of any marketing playbook. But how does the online environment or digital environment kind of exacerbate that? How does it challenge how we should start thinking about more holistic brand experience?
Yeah. I think the key issue that is being manifested more so in digital environments and digital touch points is the fact that CX as a craft is currently separated in most companies from brand marketing, right? And CX as a craft was born because and for the digital age, very different from brand marketing. And that's a good thing, right? This is a craft that at its center, the center philosophy that commerce happens at the touch point, the digital touch point, brand value exchange happens at the digital touch point. This is wonderful. However, because it's detached from brand marketing, over time, it became a discipline that is kind of, how should I put it nicely?
I put it honestly.
not bullied, but very much dominated by a set of way too narrow set of efficiency KPIs that appease boardrooms, right? So when we design an experience online solely for efficiency, right? And it's kind of lacking any feeling, any brand promise, any brand experience, that's when we get a really shitty experience. And so, yeah, that kind of sums it up. That's one of the underpinning reasons why this decline is much more felt in online touch points than others.
I mean, at WARC, we're all about effectiveness, right? Of course, efficiency is one part of the equation. And CX is always something that is associated with optimization from a customer standpoint. It's convenient. I mean, who doesn't want to get to point A to point B as fast as you can? But let's bring it back into the world of branded marketing. How do we bring that emotional brand magic back into CX in a way that really drives outcomes? Because like you said, you're still speaking to the boardroom. Yes, you have to be efficient, but how do we then, change our approach so that we're more effective by thinking about the brand at the heart of that?
Yes, absolutely. So before I answer the actual question, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about appeasing the board. So at RGA, we actually wanted to quantify this philosophy and really understand from the data what are the core drivers, the most important drivers for customer satisfaction and customer loyalty across different categories. So we surveyed 13,000 consumers across 18 categories, 77 brands. And it was quite amazing to see a very decisive outcome. A key takeaway was that it doesn't matter which category you're playing in, the top 3 drivers to get the highest CSAT score are always a combination of brand and CX elements, right? And so I do believe that sharing that kind of data with your management to show that, we're talking about customer lifetime value that is being associated with this. So within this data is also the answer to your question, right? If the data shows us so clearly what we need to do, we need to start reconnecting those two disciplines. And for some organizations, they'll have to take baby steps, right? And for some organizations like Sephora, they're way ahead, right? It's kind of the advanced version. But I do think just understanding where the disconnect is coming from, why the disconnect is coming from, will go a long way to start making incremental changes to how a company thinks and operates, and how those two disciplines are shifting, again, not a lot necessarily, shifting their thinking, their execution, and the way they're measuring success, right? And in the presentation, I was saying, after we make all these changes, how will we know we're getting somewhere? How will we know we're making a change when brand marketers care about making every click, swipe, and conversation as meaningful and impactful as their Super Bowl ad? And for your CX team to not just ask how fast can this convert, but how should this experience make you feel, right? And I think once we get to that point, we're going to start seeing the impact out there in the world.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, because the thing that we need to fix is two people speaking different languages, right? So we need to align. Earlier, you spoke about aligning around customer lifetime value. I think the other one you're saying kind of in the ways of working, kind of embedding certain language from other teams to the other one. Is there anything else you would add to kind of start making sure that everyone speaks the same language?
Yeah, I think from a brand marketing perspective, it is key to understand that as opposed to the CX craft, brand marketing really took off at a time where you had static products sitting on a shelf, right? No website, no social presence. The way to tell a story that would differentiate them existed in some mass media ecosystem, right? And so the creative strategy, the creative concept, the words on the slide really, really mattered to tell that emotional story, because you were hoping that someone's gonna watch a TV ad and will have such strong emotional association with that brand that by the time they get to the shelf, they'll choose that brand, right? We haven't evolved our thinking and our craft away from that. We're still working with the pyramids and the frameworks and the brand guidelines, but what about experience principles, right? What about, instead of spikes of campaigns, what about creating creative systems, right? So I do think a lot of the pushing must come from the brand people, just inviting CX teams into the table and having those brainstorm discussions. And at RGA, whenever we do that, that's when the magic happens. That's the impactful work that wins awards.
On that note, thank you, Yael, for helping us unshittify our brand experience.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Cannes Lions will leave you with unmatched learnings, experiences, and connections, and a notebook full of brilliant ideas and inspiration. But with a program packed with cutting-edge talks, you can't be everywhere at once. Lions Advisory's Cannes Lions Deconstructed is the solution. Our team brings your business curated access to the thinking behind the world's best work, transforming those had-to-be-there moments into business results through a live session. Visit www.lions.co/advisory to find out what we offer.
What's the real cost of dull in media, of serving ads in places where people scroll, skip, or tune out too quickly? The latest findings from the groundbreaking, eye-watering cost of dull research project addresses the financial impact of dull media for brands. Premiering a new study of 60 formats across 12 countries, attention expert Dr. Karen Nelsonfield and Adam Morgan, co-founder of eatbigfish, have put a concrete price on unseen media, formats that leak attention, and the quiet billions lost when we mistake impressions for impact. When even great creative can't beat the limits of a low-attention format, what are the fundamental shifts we all need to make? Adam Morgan and Karen Nelsonfield join me now. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, Adam, first question for you. For those who are unfamiliar with the origins of this project, tell us a little bit more about it. What are you trying to uncover?
Yeah, so this is the second year of a 3-year project. The Cost of Dal started about 18 months ago and really was born out of frustration that I had with the tolerance that the marketing and communications business seemed to have with the vast amount of dull and mediocre stuff that was going out. It just seemed, I couldn't believe we were just allowing it all to happen, and I wanted to make some kind of intervention. So at the time, I thought it was all going to be about dull content because that's what I could see. And I knew as an ex-ad man, that's what I knew was just this shocking waste of money. So last year, John Evans and I presented The Extraordinary Cost of Dull Content, which was some work that Peter Field had done with the IPA and John had done with System 1, looking at putting a concrete number on what it costs for a brand owner to be dull. And then we met Karen, and Karen said, of course, content is expensive, but actually, I think you'll find that actually media might be even more expensive. And I said, well, really? Can media be dull? And can it be that expensive? And that's where this project started.
To answer yes. We'll find out. Dr. Karen, now that you've come on board, tell us, what were you trying to achieve in this second installment?
Look, I mean, what Adam just said is what I've been sort of working with for the last 8 years of the business that I have. Ultimately, we knew that media essentially controls how much attention can be earned regardless of the quality of the content. So it was a perfect match for him to kind of come and approach me around doing this project. But what I wanted to achieve was actually, this is work that I've done over the years, but I think the main thing I wanted to achieve was put a price on it because, I've been talking about the value of seen versus served and the value of, getting attention versus non-attention for years and years and the problem with viewability. But, most advertisers don't really kind of understand it and take it on board until they feel the number. And we've managed to do that right down to an advertiser level.
That's how you get people's attention, right? You put a concrete number there to see actually that's costing you. So, Adam, maybe the next question is for you. What are some of those expensive mistakes that you see marketers are making when they're, looking at their media, looking at their creative? And can you maybe talk about some nuances between either markets or maybe brands at different stages in their journey?
Well, I think one of the big differences between the cost of dull content and the cost of dull media is that by and large, I think people sort of know that the content is too dull. They think it's just okay because it's for performance as some other reason. We can kind of see it's dull. We set the bar a bit lower. I think one of the amazing things about Karen's work is that actually I bet most people just don't see what's going on really. So I think what we're doing with the cost of dull content was shining a cost on the price. I think what Karen is shining a light on is just what's going on that we're not really looking hard enough. And that's pretty much across most markets and most media. I mean, the study you've done, Karen, is across how many markets? Just remind me.
I think it's 12.
Yeah.
12 countries, 60 formats.
And 60 formats.
It's a lot.
So it's universal almost, I think.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because you say, people don't really know. I think it's more they don't want to know, or most people think that the creative drives the opportunity. I mean, we're here at the Festival of Creativity, right? So there'll be some people that, generally kind of come up to me and say, no, but creative fix everything. And obviously today everyone in the audience was shocked, but, this is kind of a real, I guess, call out for the importance of the unification of creative and media as a future state and how working separately as separate units in agencies and in brands is quite, bad from a brand growth perspective.
You picked up on an interesting nuance. I mean, last year it was, the extraordinary cost of dull. Now it's eye-watering cost of dull. Can you maybe just clarify what we mean by dull media in this case? Maybe it's not as clear as obviously a dull creative people can understand that. But what is a dull media, Karen?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And it's interesting because I really wanted to replicate the methodology that Adam and team did last year because I wanted it to be consistent so that the audience that follows this work doesn't feel like there's a large difference in measurement. So basically I did the same thing. So I gathered all the data. It's 190 campaigns. It's a huge amount. I think it's 115,000 views. And basically what I did is I tried to pull that into quartiles, but instead of using
emotional strength as the indicator of dull and non-dull, I used a metric called attention volume, which is basically a measure of how much attention are you getting relative to how long the ad was on screen. And it sort of basically kind of gives us a proportional number, and it basically gives us how much time and how many people are paying attention. So it's a volume number. So it's similar in that it's, it's strength and non-strength, but it's defined by an attention volume number.
Follow up for you, Karen. I mean, you live and breathe this every day. And now that you've done this research, was there anything that surprised you? Was it just validated a lot of the things that you've been going on about?
With respect, nothing surprised me because it just reconfirmed what I've known for a very long time. I think modeling the cost was perhaps the most striking thing for me, and we were able to put a proportional influence in the presentation, which So I think for me, nothing generally surprised me, but it all just completely made sense. I mean, the Challenger brand issue came up, so challengers are hit the hardest, and ultimately challengers are the ones that need most attention, but they're not getting it. So nothing truly surprised me other than the scale of the number, I think.
Adam, anything surprised you? And then I'll add a second question to that. What do you think will surprise maybe your clients when you present this kind of research to them?
I think it's Karen talks a lot about across the 4 quartiles, the scale and speed of the drop-off. I think the scale of that collapse is key. I think the other interesting thing is that whereas in the cost of dull content, the work that Peter and John demonstrated is that actually if you spend enough money behind it, it can still work. It's just very expensive. What Karen's work shows is that actually because you need at least 2.5 seconds for memory structures to be formed, and a lot of this media doesn't even give you that, it's not that it's more expensive, it's that it just doesn't work at all in terms of brand building. So there's a real difference between the two in these regard.
I mean, that's something that we've found before, but at scale it is quite striking to see. And to your point about, the attention volume defines outcomes, and we know that from a long history of it. But to your point, being able to kind of separate it into quartiles, every single outcome metric that we had in the data set, and there were quite a few, they literally fell in lockstep with the attention volume quartile. So I guess that was not surprising, but also surprising. We expected some variation, but for it to be so perfectly, aligned in terms of going down, I think that was, you're right, a little bit of a surprise.
What I love about both of you being in the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity is that, we're here to champion creativity, but it's not just creativity, right? And there's a great provocation in your session, which is that even if brands have a great creative, why can't it beat a low attention format? Karen, could you maybe explain why this was in the synopsis and why it's important for us to have that discussion?
Sure. I mean, this is something that creatives struggle to hear, right? So how it works is we're trained to scroll. We're trained to skip. We're trained to look at the feed. We're not trained to look at ads. And the way that the user experience essentially is built within each of the platforms defines how much attention can be achieved. So what that means is amazing creative on a high attention format, you might get 15 seconds of attention. The same creative on a low attention format, you might still only get 1 second of attention. And it's directly related to the influence of the user experience from the format. So basically what it means is regardless of how amazing your creative is, you can't earn more attention because we're trained to scroll straight away, essentially.
All right, last question. What's next for this amazing project?
Well, I'm very excited that today we launched a new fragrance, actually, around the project. We thought that actually, if you're going to come to Cannes is a festival of ideas as much as impact, we should bring an idea here with us as well. And last year, after I presented here with John Evans, president of a French agency, wrote and said, look, we're thinking of replicating the Costa d'Al in France, and here it would be called Le Coup d'Ennui. And I thought two things when I heard that. One is, what a fantastic language French is. Even the word for boredom sounds sexier than it does in English. And the second thing is, ennui sounded like one of those kind of 90s kind of, fragrance launches. So we've launched a fragrance called Ennui that has a scent of burning money. I'm wondering if you'd just like to, I'm going to spray a bit on a card here for you, Rica, and you can just enjoy the fragrance for yourself.
Cost of burning money. How much money are we talking about?
Well, you can't afford the amount of money that it actually costs.
Let people interpret that themselves. If you want to go and smell this yourself, go and find Adam while you're here at Cannes.
I'll be carrying it around in Cannes for the next few days.
Oh,
so stop me and try it.
Just watch out, Ken.
Stop me and try it.
All right. Well, thank you both for being on the podcast.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Thanks very much indeed.
90% of trend reports come from 10 cities. That's not the real world, and relying on such a narrow interpretation of trends isn't giving brands the insights they need to be different and drive real growth. Amy Daroukakis is a co-founder of Culture Connectors and joins us following her brilliant workshop at Cannes Lions on how to develop more insightful and impactful trends. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I need to ask about that statistic. Why do 90% of trend reports come from 10 cities?
I mean, I've been in this game for 2 decades, and I think it's important that we do say that, and we say that out loud. As much as they come from 10 cities, the strategy and the outlook and the glaze is really from London and New York, if we're going to be really honest with ourselves. We tend to focus on markets we know. And it's for a lot of companies, it's been easier to hire as close in as possible. But what that's done is we've seen sameness. You see sameness in cars. You see sameness in the hotels in which we stay at. And as an industry, I don't think we've done really good with this.
Well, I'm based in Asia, so I completely resonate with what you're saying, that it's actually, when you're talking about the trend, it's more likely more of a Western gaze. So how do we then get more representative insights from other markets? Because I know a lot of that has to do with the operational aspects of it. You know, those countries might feel really far away. How do we start getting more representative insights?
Well, first of all, you need to make friends. And every year with 4 friends, we gather all the core trend reports that are paywall free. We say paywall free because we still respect people's bread and butter that can pay their bills. But that's hundreds a year. And a lot of trend reports are being more produced for PR purposes. And there's a lot more content. What that's meant is there's been this big global folder that we create, thousands of people look for it and access it. And what that meant then is an imprint and a kind of a wave that when I wrote this love letter, I wrote a global love letter. I did this is going to age me, like a Jerry Maguire type manifesto of all the things I was tired of seeing. And then I decided to knock on doors. And because of this trend folder and because of writing on LinkedIn, people waved back. So it's going to take effort on our part to find those voices. But when you do, I mean, it's extraordinary. And for instance, Sandra, who is our representative, there's 59 countries for Peru. It's the first time in her career, and I talked about this earlier today, that she was asked to talk about Peru. You know, she had to be based in Paris because that's where work is. But that was the most surprising thing, was just the joyfulness that people wanted to present their market, because how we unpack it is through sensory signals. And so it's their love letter to their culture or their topic. So, grief is a very different imprint and conversation than Botswana. But I mean, I will say the markets that are known and get the most doors, knocked on, the effort was different. The effort from places where they hadn't been asked was extraordinary.
I love how you called it. It's a love letter, right? Obviously, maybe born from frustration, right? But you can really see that it is born from a place where people want their markets to be seen, to feel heard from the brands who are trying to connect with them, right? So there seems to be this disconnect.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And this narrowness and also this surprise at the extraordinary talent, because the whole point is that they're independent, the majority, because I wanted people that are in streets, in coffee shops, seeing when we talk about culture, a lot of the agencies out there, it still tends to be within white walls, and I mean that in more than one way. And the importance of living, breathing culture. If we're going to talk about cultural change and cultural shifts, you need to see it, you need to feel it, hence the sensory signals. But there is running themes that, are present throughout this. We did a big mega report with all of the different minds, and the pulse of change, the pulse of looking back, the pulse of religion in different ways and spirituality. So if you look broader at warm data, this isn't my language, this is somebody else's, but I loved it. Warm data is very different in a world of, I'm going to use, how many times we're going to play a drinking game of saying AI? AI is cold data, right? It's also untraceable data. So warm data from many different places gives us a different imprint of where culture is going. And I think it's really important.
I love that use of language with its warm data, its sensory signals. It feels so inherently more human in the way that you understand culture. Can you explain a little bit more about that methodology? Why is that important for brands who are really trying to tap into what culture really should be about?
Yeah, of course. So why sensory signals? Well, I'll take one step back into there's what I set up today in the workshops is the Trend Galaxy framework, because trends have had really bad PR these last couple of years. The TikTokification, the very language of how people describe trends. It's on every new sandwich. I was at the airport. It was like, what's trending, for products. So we've kind of become destigmatized to the language of what it means. And so brands just kind of have been a little bit more flippant with it. But I do think trends matter. And so with this Trend Galaxy framework, it's the idea of looking at speed. So it goes from shooting stars to constellations to new planets to underexplored universes. And they each have a different speed and a different purpose. So a shooting star is really around comms and brand tonality and playfulness, and you see it within campaigns. These are what win these awards, why we're here. But then, underexplored universes, you go to the other extreme. Placemaking places need that. These are people that design neighborhoods for 15 years into the future. So they need to have a different set and outlook of trends. And then the idea with sensory signals, which becomes the layer in point, which is what we got playful with today as groups, is about bringing it to life and feeling it. Because, so many trends and these decks, they're just decks of data. And I want you to feel what AI slop tastes like. I want you to taste it. I want you to tell me what it smells like. I want you to tell me what is the sound of loneliness? So I picked a shooting star for the workshop. There was a shooting star, the constellation, a new planet, an underexplored universe, and I picked a trend for each. So it went from creature comfort to friendship as family, to loneliness, and then AI slop. And then everyone kind of took 6 senses with a wild card and unpacked them. But I did set it up by showing kind of the brains of the culture connectors. So I picked 6 signals from the collective. For instance, the taste came from our expert in grief. So hers was a memorable meal. And we're starting to see graveyards that have mother's recipes on them. Mom's cookies, or, grief is a hard thing to approach and talk about, but people are coming together to bake their favorite ... in order to talk. So there's entry points. So that's why our sensory signal. See how it's just like it's the ability to kind of like unpack something in a much more extraordinary way. Our wild card came from Suleiman Khan, who's our disability wisdom expert, and it was all about sensory touch and disability connected to disabilities, which is again something we don't always talk about.
Of course, when we go into that space, right, you're really immersing yourself in the world of these audiences and these cultures. But this is more for the marketers, I suppose. What do you hope that they bring back and how they start translating that into their strategy and how that delivers business outcomes for the organization?
That's a great question. Well, I think there's no better time to understand the importance of localization. And we can use the cliche word globalization because, that could be another drinking game into itself. But we do need the balance of both. And, let's just use Pop Mart as an example. It's a Chinese brand, but it blew up because of Korean influence. There's so much magic that exists in markets outside of the ones we always look at. And so, first of all, to create a culture internally that, first of all, recognizes that nuance is important, looking into your teams, empowering them with voices. And then if you can put processes in, if you can be honest with yourself. So that's why the Trend Galaxy framework is just as important for us as outside consultants to explain, but internally. Because I guarantee that right now there's a CEO talking about Brad Summer. Right? The speed in which companies...
Sorry, that was so last year. Come on. That was so last summer.
But to make the decision-making pieces, these are big ships to turn. And so first of all, be honest with yourself. Are you a shooting star company? Can you operate at that speed? Or are you a new planet? You need more proof points. Well, then we will bring you different resources and different signals. So it's first of all being honest with who you are as a brand, looking at the extraordinary talent within your own team, looking wider, and then knowing that if you want to stay within cliches and stay within 10 cultures, you're going to do well with that. But you're never going to go past the arch. You're never going to win the award.
Thanks, Amy, for joining the podcast. Where can our listeners find out more about your workshops?
You can drop me a note on LinkedIn where I like to share uncomfortable things. And then we have our own podcast, which is the Culture Connectors, where we interview a different part of the group every week. So this week is grief. Thanks for having me.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks to all of our guests for their time and expertise. We'll be back tomorrow with our next special episode from Cannes Lions. Make sure you don't miss an episode of our daily Cannes episodes by subscribing on your favorite podcasting platform. And to check out the rest of our content from Cannes Lions, check out WARC.com. Thanks for listening and see you tomorrow.